Thank you for joining us today. My name is Keith Larson, and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. The Forum meets on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant at noon. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. We host debates and discussions of current and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the Louisville community. For more information, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. Today's topic is the Watterson Divide, how Louisville Metro and its home rule cities can best serve our community. As we approach 20 years since the merger vote that joined Louisville with Jefferson County, many in our community are reflecting on the strengths and shortcomings of our merged government. Supporters of the merger said it would make government more efficient, but to strike a balance between efficiency and the need to help keep government close to its people, Louisville's 80-plus home rule cities retain some of their independence. 2 decades later, some argue we have too many home rule cities, that they're draining tax revenues that could flow into Metro and the Urban Services District. Others say that the home rule cities are efficient, and we should make it easier for neighborhoods to incorporate and for unincorporated areas to be annexed. And still, there are those who think we can move forward with the existing framework, but that it needs some tweaking to address inequities. Joining us today to tackle these issues, we have 3 speakers with 3 very different perspectives. We've asked all 3 to give opening remarks, which will then be followed by your questions and answers. I'll just introduce all 3 at the same time. First, we're honored to have Mayor Bonnie Jung with us, who is the mayor of Douglas Hills. Bonnie is serving her 2nd term as president of the Jefferson County League of Cities. Mayor Jung was appointed to the Douglas Hills Cities Council in 2009. She was elected mayor in 2015, and she is also a member of the board of directors for the Kentucky League of Cities. Next, we will have President David James, Metro Council President David James. President James was reelected this year to serve as a 4th term as president of the Metro Council. He has served 2 terms as majority leader, a position that elevated him to president pro tem of the Metro Council and the chair of the Democratic Caucus. President James represents District 6, which does not contain any home rule cities. And then finally, we are pleased to have Councilman Anthony Piagentini join us. Councilman Piagentini was elected in November 2018 to serve Metro Council District 19. He serves the suburban cities of 4 home rule cities, as well as many unincorporated neighborhoods. He has been elected to serve as chair of the Minority Caucus. Thank you, and please join me in greeting our speakers today.
Do you want me to sit or stand? Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Joe, and all of you for inviting us to Louisville Forum today so we can have a wonderful discussion about our merged consolidated government and the role that the 80 cities in Jefferson County play. Let me first give you a few facts about the 80 cities you might not know. Now, Douglas Hills, where I'm mayor, has had 2 Olympians from our 25-meter pool. One was back in 1998 with Leanne Fetter-Witt, who at Korea placed 4th in the women's swimming. This past month, if you were watching television at 6:30 in the morning, you got to see Brooke Forty, who is a resident of Douglas Hills, swim the first leg of the 2x4, the fastest part of that leg. She came home with a silver medal. When she came home, there was a lot of conversation, you'll read it in the Courier, about her lakeside swimming, but she will tell you that she learned her love of swimming from our 25-meter pool at Douglas Hills. Also, I want to tell you, did you know that St. Matthews used to be the largest potato producer in the United States? That's the reason why you have the railroad track, and also close to the city, St. Matthews produced all of the majority of the potatoes in the United States. That Middletown is home of a former governor. Both the Kentucky Secretary of State and the Attorney General live in 2 home rule cities in Jefferson County. Of the 100 largest cities in Kentucky, 10 of them are in Jefferson County, and I'm proud to say that Douglas Hills is number 79. On any given day, Monday through Friday, Jeffersontown becomes the 6th largest city in Kentucky because the folks that choose to work in their commerce part. So why is all this important? Because 1/3 of the population in Metro Louisville is in incorporated home rule cities. Because 22% of the new growth that's happening in Jefferson County is happening in and outside the Watterson Expressway. Now, we've had over 2 decades, as Keith said, of trying to make merger work. While it's beneficial to many, the results have been unfortunately disappointing to some that don't reside in the areas that are urban service district or even in some incorporated cities. So how do we make this work? It's got to be equality and inclusiveness. Partisan politics, the 9th Street divide, the Watterson Expressway divide, this nonsense of urban versus suburban, incorporated versus non-incorporated, it has gotten in the way of making merger work in our consolidated government. So many of you might not be unaware that when all of LMPD police resources were down here inside the Watterson last summer, all of the suburban cities took care of every single community outside the Watterson Expressway. That was St. Matthews and Shively and Graymore, Devondale and Jeffersontown. They took care of the county folks, the folks that are part of Louisville Metro. When the East Government Center was closed in my area, they took away everything. There was nothing left. You have to go one place to driver's license, another place to get your car license. All of a sudden, there was no neighborhood place. I had a lady show up at City Hall in Douglas Hills one day. It wasn't my job, but she needed help. I got in my car and drove her myself to the nearest neighborhood place so that she could get some housing, affordable housing, that she could get what she needed. You think about our ambulance service, Metro Louisville's ambulance is supposed to cover all of the county. We're down now to 6 or 8. With the fact that I have Middletown, Anchorage, Fire Department, and EMS, I know that somebody will respond if I need something. So the 80 cities outperform USD in a lot of ways, and one has been really controversial, and that's waste management. $25 per household in the urban service district is what those folks pay for garbage pickup. In Douglas Hills, it's $11.60. In most suburban cities, it's less than $15. We get full service, garbage, recycle, and anything else you need, yard waste, every single week, every month, all year long. So cities are able to provide the immediate services that might not be able to get to them, and we've done that since our inception. Sometimes we felt like we've been alone, but we have able to stand up and do it. So what I want to say is I think it can work, but I think it needs to work on both sides. We're willing and able to bring our community together, because when we grow, we all grow. So again, thank you for letting me put a spotlight today on our 80 suburban cities. And I look forward to your questions, and thank you again for having me.
Well, hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a good afternoon. Before I get started, I'd just like to recognize the fact that as we are here at this very moment, we are unfortunately burying a law enforcement officer whose life was taken just last week. In recognition of that, I would ask that we take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. First of all, I want to say to the rest of the table, Bonnie, I'm glad you're here, and Councilman Piagentini, I'm glad you're both here. We are all friends. We know each other. We travel together. We debate one another fiercely. But at the end of the day, we're still friends, and we'll debate fiercely today, but we're still friends. So don't think that that we went out leg wrestling. A couple things I want to talk to you about. I'm not going to have a long speech. I would rather answer your questions. I think that's more effective. But I do want to talk about a few things. And the first thing I want to talk about is that my council district doesn't have a home rule city in it. But do I think that affects me in the way that I operate? No. I still go to the Jefferson County League of City meetings and listen to things that are taking place. Do I believe that we have home rule cities for a reason? Sure we do. The reality is merger would have never passed if we didn't do that, right? That's the reality. And so we have 80 plus cities in our city. And sometimes that's a really great thing, and sometimes it's not so great. Yes, garbage collection is cheaper with the private collectors, but you know what wasn't mentioned? Those same collectors that we have in the urban service area are the same ones that go out to the suburban areas and clean the streets when it snows. So there's a whole lot that's involved in that, more than what people sometimes say. But ultimately, what we have to do is get along with each other and not worry about the urban-suburban divide, the 9th Street divide, the Watterson divide. That's what it's all about. And you say to yourself, well, consolidated local government, when I look around Louisville right now, I'm not real happy with what I see. I don't think anybody is, all right? It didn't work out in this particular administration the way that we thought it should, all right? And we all know that. So it's not necessarily always was 67C bad or 67C good. KRS 67C is the Consolidated Local Government document that created us. I always say that it's consolidated local government, it's not merger. Because what we actually did is we eliminated the city of Louisville and renamed Jefferson County Louisville. That's what we did. And so I just think it's important that we talk about the facts as they are and not whatever politicians talk about to make you think certain things. So those are the facts. The other facts is that when I was around as a police officer for 30 years, prior to the consolidation of our governments, it was quite often, regularly, I would listen to the radio and I'd hear about an accident on the Watterson Expressway near Bardstown Road. And then I would hear a officer arrive and say, radio, this is on the county, I'm out of here. And just leave the accident victim sitting there. Accident victims didn't care if it was the county police car that showed up or the city police car that showed up. They wanted the police. And so by having consolidated local government, we did a good thing, all right, as far as law enforcement and our public safety. You know, Metro Safe is a model for the rest of the country. And so consolidated local government can work, and it can work well, as long as the executive does a good job running the show. Thank you.
I have show and tell. All right. The good news is my show and tell is actually in the little packet that you all have at your tables. We just have one packet per. So first, I just want to reiterate something President James just said, which is I love the Louisville Forum for the opportunity for civil discourse, even when there's areas of passionate disagreement. We saw yesterday on Twitter a few elected officials use expletives against other elected officials without any debate on facts or issues. And as far as I'm concerned, that tears apart not just at the ability of elected officials to work together, but it tears apart sort of the social fabric of, you know, we can disagree on policy things, and at the end of the day, very much agree on our common humanity and the other things that join us together. So thanks to Louisville Forum for giving us this opportunity. I have three themes that I want to point out. One is that people prefer suburban cities, and they have demonstrated that through where they live. That those outside the USD pay for most of the city's budget and get a fraction of the services. I'll give you some information on that. And then philosophically, a little less data, government is best that manages as locally as possible. So The Metro Republican Caucus, we just shared this with my Democrat caucus colleagues, paid for a study by U of L and some folks that are sort of census experts and economists. And a couple of the results were that districts in western Jefferson County, the western parts of the city, downtown and some areas of the southwest, districts 1, 5, 4, 15, 21, 10, 14, all but 14 are in the USD, have lost population. Over the past 20 years, we did a 20-year study of population movements, while districts in the east have gained the most population. And that tends to be where most of the suburban cities, or those like myself who don't live in a suburban city, but live immediately adjacent to, for example, Middletown in my case. There have been huge movements of minorities. As a matter of fact, the minority movement population has significantly outpaced the white population movement in the city. And we can see the racial divide by living circumstances, right? The density of black and white neighbors who live in certain neighborhoods evaporating through what? Freedom and egalitarianism, right? Just now that we're past redlining and all of the racist and structurally racist problems that we've had in the past, just allowing people to choose where they want to live, they choose to live in neighborhoods that are safe, in neighborhoods they want to live in. And we have seen by far the biggest movements of African American and black residents into these same suburban districts, whether they're moving into or surrounded or in the immediate vicinity of these suburban cities. It's a little different. We looked at all different racial demographics that the census provides us. Hispanic population actually a little more spread evenly. But then you can look at Asian-only families, and they also are choosing to live largely in the suburban areas where these cities are. So people are choosing with their feet, if you will. How much are those outside the USD paying, right? And how much services are they being provided? Income tax, or as we call it, occupational tax, is the primary source of revenue for metro government, right? The next largest is property tax, but property tax is a little less than half of the scope that income tax is. Our study also looked at by district, the average household income and then the count of households. So we were able to predict what the total income is for those districts. By doing a conservative estimate, non-USD districts have $15.376 billion in income that they're paying occupational tax on, whereas inside the USD, it is less than $10 billion. So 50% more occupational tax is being paid outside the USD. There is a property tax differential, but as you're going to see in a second, the suburban districts and those that live outside of the urban services district pay a premium to cover the services they don't get from the city. Right? A sample of some of those services that if you live outside of the USD you don't get. Waste management we talked about. You have to get with private contractors who live in a suburban city. Louisville Fire, you have to have a suburban fire district that you live in and pay an additional tax rate to that. EMS, we have had EMS explode in the suburban areas of the city. They are now doing 10 times more runs into the urban services district than Louisville EMS are doing outside of the urban services district. And then there are many services where if you live outside of the USD, you get a fraction of those services, right? And that is community building minus the zoo. I like to say I love the zoo. I go to the zoo all the time. I say we all pay for that full force. Louisville Forward minus Develop Louisville. A lot of Louisville Forward's efforts are in downtown. I'll show that in a second. And even LMPD. And I'll just highlight a couple of the charts here. I'm not going to go one by one through them. But for example, we broke down LMPD street patrol numbers by division. The difference between the 8th Division, which covers this area here, including my district, all outside the USD, versus the 1st Division, which is all inside the USD, is a 9-to-1 ratio in per capita sworn officers. Right? You can also see a map of where the community centers and neighborhood places are. You'll notice that if you look outside of the Watterson, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of these type buildings. We lost the only neighborhood place in the East End that serviced 40% of the county 2 years ago. And thankfully in this budget, and I do want to thank in a bipartisan way, all the council members, including David James, for voting for that. We got that neighborhood place replaced finally. So you can see some of that here. And the last thing I'll point out is that government is best that governs closest. We all know this as council members versus the state versus the federal, right? We regularly debate that we want more control as a city than Frankfurt has over us. Just like as a state, we are pushing back on the federal government in a bipartisan way, mind you, that we want more control over our destiny than somebody who lives that much further away having control over it. And as David himself pointed out, 67C was very clear on this point. Merged government would not have happened if eliminating suburban cities was on the ballot, right? That's why it didn't happen. I agree 100% with David that the key is to have a chief executive for Metro Louisville who understands the importance of that partnership and extends that partnership to our suburban mayors like Mayor Jung. And just to, as my last point in the differentiation between where monies are spent, because this one is impossible to understand even if you look at this chart, and that is capital funding. We broke down the last 10 years of capital funding by district, okay? And as you can see, District 1 through District 26, right? And all of the different, areas where you can see capital spending here. Ms. Jung, if you could help me real quick. If you could hold that out and just keep going until it stops. When she ends, that is District 4. That is Councilman Arthur's, formerly Councilman Sexton Smith's district. For scale, that is the difference in the capital spending over the last 10 years. $211 million versus the next biggest district, which was District 5, at $26 million. And that excludes the Yum Center, soccer stadium, YMCA at 18th and Broadway, the Omni Hotel, right? It excludes, we also excluded the fiber and municipal broadband because we thought that was a service for everybody, and brownfields and West Louisville land assembly. So that's how different capital expenditures are. So when people in my district, particularly unincorporated areas, are yelling about streets, are yelling about infrastructure to support the growth, this is why. And it's not just my district. When I first took over, I rode with as many council members as I could to understand their districts. Keisha Dorsey, who represents District 3, thank you, Bonnie, you don't have to keep doing that. God bless you for doing that, appreciate it. Who represent District 3, about 2/3 of her district is Shively. 1/3 is part of Metro Louisville. She pointed out that you could look on a side of the street that was run by Shively and see well-maintained sidewalks, pretty clean neighborhood, good safety, right, reasonable safety record. And you could go right across the street that Metro government was controlling, and it was a mess, even including a Metro government department which has a warehouse in her district, where instead of parking the vehicles on the back side of the building, parked it on the street side of the building. This was Metro government employees, Metro government operations, parked their vehicles on the street side with overgrown grass and rusting vehicles and everything else, instead of keeping the area beautiful for the neighbors that they surrounded. So I agree with David. We need to do a better job of cooperating. But as you can see, if we believe, anybody that believes that the suburban cities don't have something to contribute, without them, I would argue the areas outside the USD would be in significantly worse shape than they currently are. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, everyone. First question here, this is for all the panelists. Does the population shift to eastern Jefferson County and beyond require rethinking of allocations and representation of Louisville Metro?
Let me start. Mind if I start? I would argue it requires improvement in the, so let me put it this way. My district is by far the most populated district currently. That's because the population explosion in my district is just astronomical. The least populated district currently is Councilwoman Donna Purvis's, District 5. She has seen by far the biggest population movement out of her district. Why? Because her district, why are people moving out of her district in mind? I don't care what race you are, I don't care who you are, they're doing it for the same reasons anybody moves into a neighborhood. They want a safe neighborhood, they want a clean neighborhood, they want well-maintained streets and sidewalks. The city has failed her district, and I would argue the way to improve these shifts, because I would love to slow down the development of my district and get people moving into Donna's to make this a little more reasonable, but that requires the city to do a better job in maintaining her district and not dump all the capital dollars into District 4, but dump them across the city, including these West End districts, to make them safe and to make them great on all other 25 districts for people to want to move and stay there. That's how you get people to stay in these districts.
And I would simply add that it will change the representation because, as you know, we are going through redistricting. We have to have the redistricting done by December 3rd. And so that means that because of the shift that Councilman Piagentini talked about, we have to have an average number of people in each district, which we'll get those numbers hopefully next week. But let's hypothetically say it's 30,000 people per district. Then because of the people leaving Councilman Purvis's district and Councilman Green's district, that means everybody else has to spread eastward in order to give them the 30,000 they need. I'll have to move because of the 30,000 I need, and that'll trickle on out to Councilman Piagentini's district. So your council person that represents you today, there's a good chance they may not represent you next year. And so those things will change.
And I agree. And part of what my concern is, and my love, not only as president of JCLC in our cities, is those unincorporated areas that feel like that they have been lost. And so you're right, it is going to be shifting, but you think of an area such as Fairdale or somewhere PRP, those folks are almost as large as some of the cities that we have in Jefferson County. And so if they're not going to be able to have services like they feel, then, you know, there's a possibility maybe they should become a city. And I know that's not a lot of what people want, more cities, but at the same time, the way that things are shifting, then it might be necessary to be able to form a city within another part of the area so that those folks can be serviced. I answer the phone, and I'm not so sure how many cities you can call that the mayor will answer the phone at City Hall.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question is, which I think actually folds into your previous answer, should unincorporated areas or homeowners associations be able to create themselves into a city? This is for all of the panel members.
Well, I don't know that necessarily a particular homeowner association, but I will tell you there are some strong homeowners association. When you stop and think about what the amount that the folks have to pay, they are still doing their own streets and their own lights and their own. I do my own snow removal. Nobody does it but me. And those folks have to contract just like a city does. So I'm all for it, but I think it needs to be cautious in the amount of and the places that it needs to be done, such as Fairdale, Okolona, other issues such as that.
The only thing I'll add, I live in Lake Forest. So Lake Forest is about 2,000 homes. It's a huge HOA. There's been a lot of conversation about, which is illegal right now, just to be clear. You can't, if you abut an existing suburban city, you can apply to be annexed in, but you cannot create a new suburban city. So we actually have a subdivision next to us that just got incorporated in Middletown a few years ago. So there's been a lot of discussion around it. Here's what I would say. Again, if Metro Louisville was doing a bang-up job, why would they want to incorporate? What we should be focused as Metro Louisville, and as I'm a representative of Metro Louisville, is that we should do a better job so that Lake Forest doesn't want to incorporate and do their own thing. They're like, nah, great, Metro Louisville's doing a terrific job, I want to do it. But if we're not, should we deny them the freedom to have that opportunity? That's the question, and I think I do agree with Mayor Jung. If the state legislature allows it, it does need to be done in an extremely thoughtful way. But the solution is to do a better job in representing those areas.
And I would say that I respectfully disagree. with Mayor Jung. I do agree with Councilman Piagentini. Metro government does need to do a much better job than it has been doing to represent everybody. And I think we'll have that opportunity in 507 days. But not that I'm counting.
Me too.
So I think that that we can do a better job. We should do a better job. And adding more cities does not help anything. All it does is take more money away from the services that we provide, which is why we created consolidated local government to begin with, because I'll remind you that we used to have a compact, and we had the city and we had the county, and the county would give the city extra money, and they went through the annexation wars, and in order to settle that, we had consolidated local government. And so if we want to go back to that, we could, but I don't think people would be happy. So I think we should stick with what we have and just improve it.
And I might agree with President James if I felt like that what Metro does within my particular area would be significant. I will tell you that you go down Mosier Road, which is responsibility of Public Works and Metro government to be snow plowed. It doesn't get done. You go down Blankenbaker, which is a state-owned road, but it's supposed to be maintained by Public Works and Metro Louisville. My city pays over $25,000 a year to mow and maintain Blankenbaker Parkway. And the reason why we do that is because our citizens ask for it. If I waited for the mowing to come, that's on schedule, it would be 3 times a year. So that's why the services are there. That's why the cities are there.
This is for Councilman Piagentini. Appreciate your study, but what about income of persons regardless of minority group? Isn't it true that poor people are limited to certain pockets?
Maybe, I don't know if you can glean this. Do you mean that poor people can't afford to move in other areas of the city? Is that what the insinuation is?
And I'm not sure that.
Okay,
that's
no problem. I'll take it the best I can then. So first of all, I would say no. For example, there is one of the most recent developments in my district was a low-income housing development, which was entirely, which is, so 100 and some odd unit development. Sorry, was there a clarifying thing or no?
Oh, no, it's
Okay.
a follow-up that goes.
Okay, so first of all, this idea that you must be wealthy. Now, with that said, make no mistake of it. I would argue that what you are seeing, certainly, again, even if you look at, there's the census gives several categories. Black and African American only is one category. That means the whole household is just identifies as Black and African American. There's a whole nother category for those that are like myself in a mixed race relationship. So just sticking to that population, thousands have moved out of regions 1, 3, and 5. This is all West Louisville, and largely moved into South and Eastern Jefferson County. You could probably argue much of that is going to be folks that are moving into the middle class, right? And they're moving out because they can afford a home in Lake Forest. Lake Forest does not have an area for homes less than $100,000, but we have seen an absolute explosion of what I will call a variety of price points and living opportunities. So more apartments. I mean, you've never seen more apartments in one district that have come up in the last 10 years than mine. And again, including even a low-income housing one. So I am not for, particularly if we're talking district level, right? You will always have, along Shelbyville Road, for example, higher density housing makes sense, closer to services, closer to a more, I'd be loose by saying urban, but a more densely populated, a densely populated area. You would expect to see more apartments, more densely populated. When you get to the northeastern area of my district, you're bordering on Shelby County, Oldham County, you would expect to see half-acre, three-quarter-acre lots where you have to drive places. You would expect to see more people spread out. That type of planning is good. But does that mean that I want all income levels in my district? And again, I think that is what you're seeing across the board. I would again argue that if we were doing a better job, for example, in Donna Purvis's district, of preventing and stopping this explosion of, what do they call them, legal halfway houses, right? Illegal halfway houses, we would not see so many people want to leave her district, or others that live in other areas of the city that want to move in, right? But that is a failure of the city to enforce that, creating an uninhabitable neighborhood. So it's not true that you can't afford to live in my district if you're low income, but I'm not going to be naive to say it's not as easy as in other neighborhoods. There's no question that the property values in my neighborhood versus Donna's are very different.
Thank you. So this is for everyone. Do you think it's constitutional or fair for council members who have no constituents residing in the services district to vote on services residents receive, or how the taxes are paid by residents of the services district and how those funds are allocated?
Could you say that one more time?
Basically, is it fair for council members who don't, trying to summarize, have constituents that live in,
Let's put it this way. Is it fair that I vote for Louisville Fire, which has no, which doesn't come to my district, right? Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's what we're getting at.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would say yes, I think it is. So we're all one body, we're one Louisville, and we all vote. And that's the way we set it up, that's what the law says, and you may not like that, but is it fair? Sure it is.
And the flip of that is precisely what happens too. For example, if you want to annex into a suburban city, all 26 members get to vote, and if it doesn't pass, it ain't happening. So there are plenty of things that USD members of council vote on that impact the suburban districts and the unincorporated areas of the suburban districts, and they don't have any representation there. I mean, that's the nature of a legislative body. Just like in Frankfurt, you have people in Paducah voting on stuff that mostly impacts Louisville, right? Things that impact more urban areas. That's life in this democracy.
I agree.
And so, Mayor, we have a question specifically for you. If you could, can you tell about a time that the Jefferson County League of Cities members united to achieve a helpful community initiative, such as, and they use this example, the effort to bring Google Fiber to Louisville?
Yes, when we first heard about Google Fiber coming, it was a very quick turnaround that the Jefferson County League of Cities got together with all 80 cities, and we signed the exact same ordinance. By our doing so, we did an agreement with Metro Louisville that now everyone in the county was going to be able to receive fiber optics and Google Fiber. The outcome, as you all know, was not what we wanted, but I will tell you that part of the one reason why it did not happen was because we had mayors in areas that the fiber was being put in that was, I think we were used as a guinea pig, and once we called attention to the fact that it was being installed incorrectly, that they weren't going to cut down 2 inches in the middle of a new paved road, that we worked with Metro together, and we made sure that our city all was protected and people were compensated for. So as far as fiber optics go, we have no problem at any time at all being able to be the representative for the cities and working with Louisville Metro, because that's who we are. Metro is us.
All right, thank you. This is a question was really originally written just for you, Mayor, but I think it's probably was touched on at various parts of all three of your talks. But it's about the unfair or unequal services and versus the lower tax rates. I mean, is there a correlation between lower tax rates in some of your in some of your cities, Mayor, versus the rest of the city, which gets more services?
Well, there's a misconception that if you were to get rid of Douglas Hills, then, first of all, some folks think that by Douglas Hills folks paying extra on our taxes, they don't understand why, because I pay taxes to Jefferson County just like everyone else does. I help to pay for the ambulance service. I also pay extra to have Anchorage, Middletown fire districts. The inequality comes in, I think, sometimes when we talk about those services that should be shared all across, but then someone will say, well, you're in a city, take care of it yourself. So I believe that when it comes to inequality of services, it is happening, and sometimes what's happening is they say, well, you can afford it. Now, yes, my taxes in Douglas Hills are fairly low, but for their 1.34% of their taxes, they get, as I said before, snow removal. We pay for all of our lights, all of our roads. We have 2 parks we maintain. We have 1 swimming pool. And so for a $280 tax that I pay for Douglas Hills, these services are astronomical compared to the services that I get on the amount of money that I pay on my Jefferson County taxes. Does that?
Yeah, I just want to add something that first of all, there is, to be clear, there's a property tax differential between non-USD and USD, which is supposed to pay for some of those services which they receive, which I don't, for example. Then I pay for it in a different way, right? Suburban fire tax rate, which is a property tax, which also pays for additional EMS. And then, I, through an HOA, if you're in a suburban city, it's through your suburban city's taxes, pays for things like waste removal, right? So there's different ways that's done. I think we've already proven, and I think if anybody did a full accounting of where money is flowing in the city, there is money flowing from wealthier areas of the city, many of which are outside of the urban services district, into the urban services district. This term fair always concerns me, right? Because who defines what's fair, right? Because that's the biggest problem. There is no jurisdiction on earth where well, maybe there is, but in any reasonable jurisdiction, certainly in the United States, there is no jurisdiction that gets back precisely the money they put into some government entity. Kentucky is a net tax taker from the federal government, while New York is a net tax giver. Louisville is a net tax giver to the state, whereas other cities are net tax takers. Maybe my district is a net tax giver. There's no way the amount of tax that we're paying, we're getting that same amount back in city services. Should we? Probably not. That would probably be ridiculous and overkill, right? So, and we do want a strong downtown. Trust me when I tell you, the biggest arguments I've been getting into in the last year are how much people are concerned with downtown and their safety and these other things. They want it fixed, right? So that is a natural thing that happens. But when you see things like the capital graph, where you have one district that's so ridiculously disproportionately overfunded, where I have intersections because of overgrowth that people are dying in, just extremely dangerous intersections because we've put residential neighborhoods on streets, we paved cow paths basically. That's where people start to question the fairness. So but this is why we get paid the big bucks, I guess, right? I mean, this is the form in which we debate it as these legislative bodies. So that's where, when you say what's fair, we have to balance those competing interests. And I don't want people to think that just because they pay a different rate in the USD, that those outside of it are not paying it. Many of the things that you pay for that way, we pay in other ways through other taxes or fees.
Thank you. This question is for Councilman James. Does Louisville Metro Urban Service District actually recycle? I have heard that the trash and recycling are collected separately, but actually go to the same place and get the same treatment. I don't think that's true, but I was hoping that you could clarify.
That's an urban legend. So
Yeah.
we actually do recycling. We collect recycling. We just distributed recycling, the giant, how many gallons is that? The giant cans, I don't remember the gallon number, all over the city in the urban services area. It goes to a recycling place, and we actually do recycling.
I will say that 70% of the cities in Jefferson County do recycle. And I'm glad that we now have the new cans for urban service district, because they were running about 30% of the folks that lived in the urban service district did not recycle. I mean, it was only 30% that did recycle. So I'm glad you guys got the cans so that you can recycle more. And the joke that you two, that's why we get paid the big bucks. I will tell you that if you don't know about your suburban cities, most of the mayors and council folks do this strictly volunteer. Now, I'm fortunate that I make about $8,000 a year for what I do, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't do it if it wasn't free, because I would. So when you think about those suburban cities, think about the folks that they represent. They ain't getting paid the big bucks.
Okay, thank you. This is for the council members. Can you tell us what the 10-year allocation covers and why District 4 is so much more?
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Why so much extra capital in District 4?
That was your report.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
And it may have been.
So just so you didn't hear that, David looks at me and goes, that was your report. Yeah, I would like to say I have shared it with the entirety of council. So, I mean, this simply has to do, this was 10, just to be clear, again, hold on one second. Again, I want to be super clear here. So first of all of our budgets, as Councilman Hollander, the chair of the Budget Committee, always reminds everybody, are all online. So this is no secret. We didn't make this up. And again, I have a list of exclusions here because, you know, for example, the Yum Center is a $10.8 million a year expenditure from this city. We spend it, we've been doing it for 17 years or so now. We'll be doing it for another 13 to 14 years until that's paid off. The city would have spent $350 million on the Yum Center or more by the time that thing is paid off. The soccer stadium, the Omni, right? These huge projects we excluded because there is an easy argument to be made that they have far more broadly reaching support. But if you look at the capital budget and you break down projects and where that money goes, you will very clearly see that these were capital projects that are truly District 4, which is the downtown. That is, District 4, just so you're clear, it includes the, what do we call it? Business district, yeah, the downtown business district. That's the area, right? And again, this is not to say that we're not all happy that we have a thriving business district. We all want it, right? The question is, at that ratio, right, could we fix some of the massive capital brownfield issues we have in the West End, right? My wife's an environmental scientist, for those that don't know. She has done environmental assessments on the Urban Government Center, which we're still, for some reason, can't figure out how to do a proper RFP twice and get something done with that site. It is an environmental disaster area. Mostly why it's an environmental disaster area is because the government offices that left it abandoned most of their chemicals and waste in the building and just walked out, right? Where the Urban League's track is, right across the street is an abandoned factory. My wife tried to do an environmental assessment there. There was a company, the last company that worked there they did 50-gallon drum chemical disposal. They didn't dispose anything. They put it in 50-gallon drums and they left it there, and it's still there. In the basement of the building, there's water. I mean, you can't walk in it without full hazmat because of the contamination and how bad it is. That is across the street from the place that we want to bring families into the West End to run track and to benefit from the services there and all that stuff. So let's just say you live in that district. Is that Purvis's district? Is that 5 or is that 3? It's 5. Councilwoman Purvis's district, and you want to live there and you want to live the American dream, buy a house and all that stuff. Is your property values going up at the same rate that they're going up in District 19 with that waste site 5 feet away? It's impossible. So could we have used some of that downtown District 4, business core money to fix that and have a neighborhood that the residents could better benefit from increasing their property values, building more wealth in some of these districts than the situation that we're running into today. I would argue yes. But these are, why is it so disproportionate? Got to ask the mayor's office. He's been here every single one of those 10 years. Now, with that said, the council voted on this too, right? I've been there just short of 3 years. And I would gladly take responsibility now that we've run the numbers on how we have completely disproportionately dumped money into one area of the city and not focused more equitably across the board.
And I would also add to that people don't generally come to visit Louisville to go to District Number 19. They come downtown. And so there's a reason we invest in downtown, and that's so that people come here so that we generate revenue and we have business. And so there are reasons for that. Can we do better? Absolutely.
One more thing? The only problem being, and this is a plea for Frankfurt tax reform, is that this city, again, generates all of our tax revenue on property tax and occupational tax. The only way you could argue we make any money off this tourism industry is that we employ people that work in the tourism industry. I can tell you right now that the money we make off of that is a pittance of this budget. Why do I know that? Because I know a guy who is the vice president of operations who operates 9 of the hotels in this downtown area, including some of the largest and most historic. They laid off 90% of their workforce during COVID. And you know what we didn't see, even though we laid off such a huge swath of workers in that industry? Any significant dip in the occupational tax. So this idea that the city makes money off of the tourism industry is wrong. The state makes money off of it via sales tax. And they've actually started to shift, I think rightfully so, from reducing income tax and increasing sales tax. They expanded sales tax a couple years ago, if you all remember, into a bunch of services that weren't prior taxed. Great. Apply that same logic to the city, and let's look at a process to reduce occupational tax offset by some of these tourism industries. We get nothing from gaming, we get nothing from sales tax. And the tourism industry, I would argue, it borderline costs this city money in order to bolster this tourism industry that's helped this state so much. So I love the tourism industry, I want to see more of it. I just want to see a tax structure that is reasonable for the city, and only the state can do that we can't change that ourselves.
This is for you, Mayor, and sorry I get the ones that are worded confusingly, so I'll try to paraphrase. So this is a question about Douglas Hills pre-merger and currently. What percentage of income from Douglas Hills has gone to indigent healthcare, performing arts, museums, the zoo, and the homeless?
Well, so you're asking me the percentage of what our property taxes are, our folks?
Basically, yes. So what is Douglas Hills, or what was Douglas Hills contributing to those things before the merger and after?
Well, we're still contributing the same thing. We've been around almost 50 years now. And we started out as a homeowners and development. We are now 50 years old, 5,700 homes, almost 6,000 people. I have about a 16% minority population in Douglas Hills. So I don't know the exact number. I will tell you, though, that we have been able to sustain a balanced budget with a surplus for the last 27 years in Douglas Hills. And that's because we've had excellent mayors that have used the money wisely, and they use it within their city. So pre-merger versus now past merger, I can probably say that we've kind of always been on our own, but we looked forward to being able to get more services that we felt like our folks paid for. However, if it's not there, and I'll give you a good example, and there again, where I put a police office rest area within our city council because it was moved to Westport Road. So whatever the services that our folks feel like they are not getting from Metro, I guarantee you, they always call and ask me if there's a way that Douglas Hills can provide it. And if we do, we will. And if they don't, then I have Anthony and I have 2 other council folks that cover Douglas Hills. I have no problem asking at all.
I think we have time for one more. This is for the councilman. Why wait 507 days? What can Metro Council do now? And I bet it can do a lot through setting the budget. So I don't,
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
why wait 507 days? I believe that, what can Metro Council do now? And then they thought you could do something by setting the budget. Is that correct?
So
So you start, Chief. I'll follow up.
So I would just simply say that the Metro Council is the legislative body, the mayor is the executive body. KRS 67C gave the mayor ungodly power, and that's why we have to wait 505 days.
Yeah, ditto. It is, first of all, I feel like I spend half my time in my district explaining that phenomenon, right? That I'm a legislator. I can't call the 8th Division Major and say, go do this, right? I mean, the 8th Division Major is terrific, and we have a great working relationship. At the end of the day, I'm not in their chain of command, okay? And so we set the budget as in, yeah, we say that X millions of dollars will be spent on LMPD, but that's it. I would tell you that over the last, since I've been on council, we have done way more in the budget to dictate to the mayor precisely what he is and is not to do in certain circumstances and how we want the money spent. I would argue we are micromanaging him in a way that in an ideal circumstance, we don't want to, right? We would rather just set the budget and policy and have him execute, but there's been circumstances where he's done things where we're so frustrated, where we, in the budget, when we wanted to reopen the Middletown Library, I'll also use my specific self as an example, when we put the money in, we said, and this money will be used to open the Middletown Library. I shouldn't have to do that. We should just be speaking of, you have enough money to operate it, please go operate it, but we had actually put in the budget. We can do more of that, certainly, but that gets very sticky, right? At what point do we then eliminate flexibility? We sit in this debate in Frankfurt, right, between the governor and the state legislative body, right, where they want the governor to call special sessions to do certain things related to government orders. Now, whether you believe that's right or wrong, that does slow down the executive's capability to do things and move quickly. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's not so good of a thing. The executive is there to have that capability to move quickly and do things and execute the day-to-day. So we have done more, I would say the last 3 years, certainly working with President James. We can do more maybe, but you can't overcome the power differential and what the job is of the mayor's office without having the right person in this.